Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chiseled. And why do we call it Chiseled? Because we're all a work in progress. I'm your host. I'm Rob Commodari. I'm also the author of the book Better Than You Think and co-author of Amazon best-selling book Next Level Your Life. In fact, that's where I met our guest today. So our guest today is Dale Young. Dale started life after college as an IT nerd, as he puts it, but an incident in 1992, is which we're going to get into a little bit, led him on a 30-year journey of looking for something bigger and more impactful. Now, Dale inspires entrepreneurs and business owners to embrace their unique calling, which is sometimes called divine design or eternal purpose. The person goes through a specific process that combines identity or who, community or where, and calling or why to create a transformative experience. Following your calling creates peace, direction, fulfillment, and joy. And I love that because we're going to talk about that. So Dale's a two-time international number one best-selling author. Number one, like I said, Next Level Your Life in January 23, which I was part of that book with him. It was number one in 31 categories. And then The Transformational Journey was his latest book. It came out in October of 23 and was number one in 60 categories. That's amazing. Dale's calling is to inspire calling in many others and then help them find and follow their own calling. Step into your calling and craft your legacy. Dale Young, thank you for joining us today, all the way from Fort Worth, Texas. How you doing, Dale?
I'm doing great, Rob, and thank you so much for having me on here. It really is an honor and a privilege.
It's a pleasure to have you. I'm excited to have you share your story. And I guess first, to give us some context, what happened? What happened in 1992 that led you to this 30-year journey of looking for something bigger and more impactful?
Yeah, so 1992, I had been working in Australia for about 8 years total. 3 years, broke up with 2, and then back for another 5 at the time. I was working for a defense contractor, making some crazy money. I mean, talk about 54% bonus on the base salary plus housing and utilities provided and things like that, right? So crazy money, lots of travel, lots of privilege, I would say, would be the right term. So that's kind of the background. And the government starts taxing that housing and utilities. Okay. And we're all at lunch. There's a group of us at lunch, and we're all just sitting around the table, and we're like, "Oh, this sucks," just we're out really griping out. We're going to leave. We're going to quit over this, all this sort of stuff, right? Now this tax was probably, 5% or less of what the bonus was that we were making. So I mean, it was like no big deal, really. But none of us were rational about it, right? And I'm in there with them. I'm just complaining up a storm. And out of my mouth comes these unexpected words. This is just a job, not a career. And it was in that moment that my heart finally got up to my head and said, Dale, you're looking for something different, something bigger. It's not just about money. It's not just about this little section of job. It's about something bigger and more impactful. And I thought that bigger and more impactful was a career. But that over a 30 years time span, that career got bigger, got up to passion, got bigger, got up to mission, got bigger, got up to dreams, got bigger and got up to purpose, got bigger and got up to why. And then it was, why is like the biggest question you can ask type of thing, almost. But then through that journey, I actually got baptized because I wasn't a believer back in 92. I got baptized in 98, and it really turned into a spiritual journey. And through that spiritual journey, God was just leading me step by step. When I finally got down to the why question, it was like, oh, what I'm really looking for is that calling, that God purpose, that God pull that is going to pull me forward, as opposed to me trying to have an internal push to drive myself forward. And so I like to say I found my calling in 2022, and my calling is to inspire calling in others.
That's amazing, and thank you for sharing that. So, when you were standing there and you said that this is just a job, not a
Career.
not a career, right? Did you know in that moment what your next step was?
Uh, I did not know exactly what my next step was, but I knew it had to be getting out of Australia. Okay. And because it was involved with getting out of where I was geographically, mentally, and emotionally. And that next step came back to the States in 94 and ended up taking another job about 6 months later. I was actually chief information officer for a really small company. Chief information officer meant I had 3 employees underneath me. So it was like, it was a title only type of thing, right? But I mean, it got me out of the defense contracting that I'd been in at that time for 14 years. And so I was in a comfort zone. I knew I had to take a step out of that comfort zone. And so I did that for another 2.5, 3 years, something like that. Ended up switching jobs again, getting into computer consulting. A couple of years after that, that's when I got baptized. A couple of years after that, we're part of a startup tech company in the year 2000. Can you say not a good idea? but,
Yeah, right.
but we actually made a success out of it in 2000. We were number 10 on the entrepreneur fastest growing companies in the US. Okay. 2002, we were number 23. And I think that was actually more of an accomplishment than 2000 was, because we started with basically nothing in 2000. And so anything that you add on to is a pretty big percentage growth, right? 2002, we actually hit number 23, and that was a major change for us. But then in 2004, we had internal policy problems, and we ended up having to shut the company down. So you talk about a real wild roller coaster ride. That was it.
So you're talking about shutting the company down. The company, you didn't own the company. You were working at the company, right?
I was part owner of the company.
Okay.
And I was vice president of the company.
So in 92, when you made that comment, you're in Australia, it sounds like it took you a couple of years to get out of Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going through your head in that time frame where, okay, I know this is just a job. I know it's not my career. I know I need to get out. Were you just going through the motions for 2 years, or were you planning your getaway, so to speak?
Well, I think mentally I was planning my getaway, but more importantly, I was emotionally preparing myself to get out of the comfort zone. I knew I needed to get out of that comfort zone of working for a defense contractor, because I'd been there for 12 years at the time, ended up 14 years total. And that's a very safe, very secure type of job, right? Once you get into any type of government type position, whether it's straight for the government or through some type of contractor or whatever, they've got some. I won't call them golden handcuffs, but they've got some silver handcuffs on you, right? They've got some nice benefits, 401, 401k. They even had a pension fund, which I am actually using now to help me in my coaching side of things.
Right. So what was going on between like 1994, like you gave us the I guess the timeline of things that occurred until you closed that company down. Did you, in those moments, in those years, did you feel like you were in your calling at all, or you felt like it was still a pathway to your calling?
It was still a pathway at that point. It was, I didn't really feel like I was even starting in my calling until 2011. And it was through just a series of God incidences, especially in the 2000s, that really put me on that pathway. Part of that was that startup company from 2000 to 2004. Another part of it was once I got into the new company, still in computer consulting, I was not a vice president. I was not part owner or anything like that. I had some stock options anyway, I was basically helping out my boss that had hired me way back in 1996. And I'd been with him now this was the 4th company I'd been following him to. Okay. Ended up working for him until 2009, I think it was, for 13 years, something like that. He was a great influence, great mentor for me and such like that. I learned a lot under him. His name's Gary Toch, by the way. The thing was, I was growing, I was developing, I was becoming more of a manager, more of a leader. just learning a bunch of stuff. Really, the year 2001, we, as that part of that startup company, we got into reading some books, reading some transformational type books. Good to Great was one of the big ones at the time that we did that. And I remember there, some part of Good to Great will come back in the story a little bit further down the line. But another piece was that I started following John Maxwell and read a lot of the John Maxwell books. And in 2002, 2003 timeframe, I actually started taking the rest of the company through the 17 indisputable laws of teamwork. Got a video series, John Maxwell video series. Every week would meet and would watch one of the videos and discuss it and such like that. And so I was learning some facilitation skills, learning some coaching skills at one point through all that process and everything. So I was doing stuff that wasn't just IT during that period of time, really becoming more of a leader, more of a manager, more of somebody that was developing much more relationally, I'll put it that way.
So all this was preparing you for your ultimate calling.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And so take me back to that first client, the first interaction where you were like, you're Coach Dale now.
Okay. So just before that, I guess it was 2007, I actually heard about life coaching as a profession. And it was like, okay, sounds really interesting. I'm going to do a lot of research on this. And then it was like, I'm going to put it on the shelf because it's not for me. Okay. It is coaching. It looks really good, but I could not find anything that was a spiritual relationship. Okay. Now, I was probably not looking in the right place because it did exist. Okay. But I can't find it. And so I put it on the shelf. Now, got baptized in 98 and 2007. I'm saying this is not the path because it doesn't have any spiritual part to it, right? So I've grown quite a bit over that time.
So Dale, if I can interrupt you real quick. So part of your standard, it had to be wrapped around the spiritual element, correct?
I knew at that point that if it didn't have some kind of spiritual element, I was not going to be in it long term.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so put it on the shelf in 2007, but I started doing some assessment work. I got certified in something called the Core Map, which is kind of a blend of DISC and Myers-Briggs type of thing. So learned about all of those and such like that. And then in 2009, I'm walking through Half Price Books, and this book falls off the shelf and conks me on the head.
Literally.
Figuratively. But the book is titled Christian Coaching.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, that might as well be literally because it felt
exactly.
And so I took that book home, devoured it in 2 days, and it's like, okay, this is what I've been looking for. And so I started looking around, poking around with the people that were in the book. Well, there was this one guy in the book, Christopher McCluskey, because the book was written by Gary Collins, but he wasn't really a coach himself. He went out and interviewed other coaches. And this one guy, Christopher McCluskey, had 2 chapters in the book, whereas everybody else only had 1. And Gary Collins said, Christopher McCluskey is known as the father of Christian coaching. And it's like, okay, well, I need to follow that guy. And so I found him on the internet and I submitted a form or whatever and got on his mailing list, but didn't really hear too much from him. And then at the end of 2010, I'm actually on the road down to Waco from the DFW area. I'm headed down to Waco to do one of these Core Map assessments, actually to do 5 of these Core Map assessments. And my cell phone rings. And this is the day when you actually answered cell phones, right? Even if the number wasn't one.
Yeah, right. Tell me about
it. And this voice came along and says, is this Dale Young? And I said, yes, it is. And he said, this is Christopher McCluskey. And I'm going, okay, I know I've heard that name before. Remind me who you are. And he said, he talks about this stuff and his father, Christian. Oh, yeah, I know who you are now. And so anyway, we had a nice little chat, and he was saying, well, we're doing a course called Introduction to Coaching, and it's going to start in January. This was like November. Here's the dates. Would you be interested in looking at it? And I said, well, tell me more. Got a little bit more stuff. I was at the point where I was actually managing a whole team of people, and I had pretty much control of my schedule. So even though the introductory course was in the daytime, it was like, okay, I can rearrange my schedule to make that work. So I signed up for it and just got into it in January of 2011, and I loved it. And it was like, okay, this really feels like I've actually set foot on the path, and I'm about to head down the path here. That's where I would say that was when I felt like, okay, this is where I'm headed. Okay.
So what did you love about it?
I just loved everything about it. I loved the Christian component. I loved the way you could bring it in. I loved how it helped people without being in their face and telling them what to do, and possibly giving them the wrong kind of advice or something like that. I loved the fact that it was a back and forth type thing. And I love the way they expressed it. They said because they were doing the ICF, or International Coach Federation style of coaching, which is more non-directive. Okay. Quick little sidebar. Coaching is an unregulated profession. And so really, literally anybody can call themselves a coach, right? But there are certain kinds of coaches and certain other kinds of coaches. And so there are coaches that are more consultative. In other words, they'll come in and they'll say, here's the plan, follow the plan. I'll keep you accountable to the plan. You'll get these results to it. Okay. That's more directive coaching. International Coach Federation is very non-directional. It's more about, I'm going to help you find what's inside you and help you figure that out, and then help you put the plan together, So it's not holding your hand and leading you down the path as much as it is making sure you find the right one. Matter of fact, there's a verse in Proverbs 20, verse 5. For the purposes in a person's heart, for the passion in a person's heart is like deep water, but a person of understanding will draw it out. Okay, and so we use that in the Christian sense of, okay, you've got it down there in your heart. Let me just help you pull that out. I'm not going to force it out, but I'm going to help you draw it out, type of thing. Kind of like drawing water from a well. And so anyway, since it was more non-directive, it was a case where it just felt a whole lot more friendly and a whole lot more right. Because I'd had mentors that would come in and say, they'll do it this way. And it just wasn't the way I would normally do stuff, right? So it was like, this is a lot more open, a lot more back and forth. Matter of fact, what they say in ICF coaching, they say you're not facilitating a dialogue between the coach and the person being coached. You're facilitating a monologue of the person that's being coached, right?
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with Christian coaching, what we say is we're not facilitating that dialogue between yourself and the guy, but we're facilitating a dialogue between the client and the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
And we're listening to the Holy Spirit as well. So we got a little triangle going along here. And I've experienced that there's been times that it's like, I ask this question, I get this prompt, ask this question, I throw this question out, and the person is like, it's like, how do you know that? And how, and it just really does unlock a lot of things when that happens. So, yeah.
So when you talk, I'm going to dive into this real quick, the Holy Spirit piece. So how do you get, like you said, it's a dialogue between the person and the Holy Spirit and yourself. It's three of there, right? How is the Holy Spirit talking to you or to the person?
I think that's very individual. Okay. For some people, they're going to hear it through my voice. And it may not be the words I say. It may be the way I say it, or the tone, or the inflection, or something like that. For other people, they may actually hear an audible voice. I've heard an audible voice one time in my life. Okay. And we haven't got up to that point in the story yet. But that audible voice was crystal clear to me at that point. But a lot of times it's just, a gut feel, it's just, how are you feeling? What Are you leaning yes, you leaning no type of thing? Tell me more about that.
Yeah.
So it is so individual that I don't think you can just broad brush it.
So when you're getting ready to coach somebody or take somebody on, do you vet them to make sure they're on that path, or you take on anybody?
So in general, okay, let me say it this way. I work best with Christian people. Okay. I have taken on a bunch of other types that have not worked out nearly as well, not nearly as good a result for either them or me. So I've focused my coaching in the last 2-3 years specifically on Christians.
That's great. That's great to hear. So take me down this road here. You talk about Dale inspires entrepreneurs and business owners to embrace their unique calling. So how do you help people discover that unique calling?
Okay. So through the whole series of things and really coming up to 2018-ish type time frame, I've been through some struggles. There was actually a divorce in that period of time. There was a change from me going full-time in IT to part-time in IT with a corresponding change of part-time in coaching to full-time in coaching. So I went through that in 2016. But in 2018, I'm trying to recover, trying to build up my coaching side of things. And one of the guys I'm meeting with was part of a group that we met weekly as just pure coaches, just kind of like a little coach mastermind. But none of us were organizing it or getting paid, but we were just joining in as a mastermind to support each other. And one of the guys kept talking about this organization they called We Align, WEALIGN, We Align. And he kept talking, I'm doing this with this guy. I'm doing this through We Align with this guy. Finally, I broke down. I said, Pete, tell me about this We Align thing. He said, well, let's get on a call. So we got on a call. Turned out We Align was doing Clifton Strengths, or the old Strength Finder, work with people. And they had a whole process for doing it. And so background on me, I'd actually taken the Clifton Strengths like 6 times. I didn't think it was that good of an assessment because I kept coming out with different results each time. Okay. Going through the process with Pete, I found out why I was different each time and the fact that it is part of the nature of the test. And I found out my top strengths and how I was not using them all in the best sense. And I found out my bottom strengths, which was why I wasn't doing better at building up a business. Okay. And so I put all of that together and I said, okay, I need to go get certified in that. I got certified in that. In the certification process, I learned a ton more. And really, it has become part of kind of a cornerstone of the coaching I do, in that it really takes people down a path of really plugging into their identity, plugging into who they are, who God made them, how God wired them, and helping them put all those pieces together in a way that makes sense and that is actionable, that they can go use to take it forward into their life and into their work.
So does it start with? It sounds like what I just heard. It starts with helping them find their identity, or claim their identity, or declare their identity.
Claim is a good word. Okay, it's always been in there, right? But you
Yeah.
may not have known it, may not have found it, may not have realized it. I've taken some people through that just even in their top 5 strengths, they say, I'm not sure that this fits. And then I start doing them coaching questions around it. And it's like, oh, and it's like they can actually claim that piece of themselves and start using it in a way that they've never used it before. So
How often, I guess is the question I want to ask, do you find that people may, and I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer or not, may be claiming the wrong identity, or is that not for you to say?
I don't know that there's necessarily a wrong identity. I would say there's more of an incomplete identity. Okay. In other words, they think that they're this big, but in actuality, they're a lot bigger. Okay. And that lot bigger is It may be like I did here, it might be just getting bigger all the way, or what it might be is getting bigger just in one direction. I've seen people that have taken the Clifton Strengths that's like, oh, I really can do that. And they've become better leaders, or they've become more creative, or they've become even more detailed. I've seen some people do that, whereas I thought the detail work was driving them crazy. It turned out it really wasn't. So I've seen all of this happen.
Yeah. Well, my wheels are spinning right now, and not to, I guess, debate or debate. Yeah, I guess it might be the right word. It's like I'm sitting there thinking. You used the words incomplete identity. Suppose somebody says, "Hey, they want to put their identity in all the big house that they own or all the cars they own." That might be what they believe their identity is. But I think but this is my opinion, by the way, that if I'm sitting in your shoes and somebody says that, I would kind of say I think that's the wrong identity. Would you agree with that?
I'd probably say it more like, is that all?
Okay.
Or,
So that's where you
or,
think.
or the other way I might say it is, okay, so imagine you had all the time, all the health, all the energy, all the money in the world. You had it all. What would you do then? Where would you be in 5 years if you had everything that you could dream of? Okay. Wave that magic wand. Where do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? Okay. Once you get to that piece and then go down a level, okay, why do you want to do that? And then go down another level. Why do you want to do that? Okay. You do 7 whys, you're at basically psychiatric counseling at that point.
Yeah. I've heard that. 5 whys, 7 whys. You got to go deep with the why. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So you think by asking the why several times might help that person clarify their identity or claim their identity?
Yeah. One of the things that kind of led me into the whole coaching side of things, I was part of a program called Pathways at one point. Had a lot of experiential based training. You could almost call it group coaching type of thing or whatever. But there was one guy, one of the big questions is, what do you want in there? Okay. And so they asked this one guy, what do you want? And he said, okay, not to be crude or anything, but he said, I want $1 million in my bank account and a hard-bodied woman and a different hard-bodied woman in my bed every night, type of thing, right? That was his answer. And we got into the why, and getting down to his real why was he just wanted to feel significant.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
And that was the way that he was going to express that significance. Now, once you get down to that, why are you doing this? What do you really want? Why are you doing it? All that sort of stuff. Then you can build it back up. Okay, well, what do you want to do to get to that point then?
It's almost like tearing down to build back up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you talk about, so that's the person goes through a specific process which combines identity with who, and then community. So you talk about community meaning where. Can you elaborate a little more on that?
Absolutely. I call it where because it's your location not only in space, but in time, right? We spend, since COVID, we spend a lot of time virtual, right? Okay. So where are you spending your time as well as where are you spending your physical identity? Where is your space at, right? So I can think about it in terms of space time. And so the where comes down to who are you around? Who are you supporting? Who's supporting you? What's your family relationships look like? What's your other relationships look like? What communities are you already a part of? Maybe church, maybe work, maybe something else like that. How do you plug all those together? Are they the right support people? There's a lot of people that are in codependent relationships or abusive relationships or something like that. You got to get out of those and get into healthy relationships. So the second part of my big coaching process is helping you figure out that whole community piece. Okay. And bringing you into the community piece that we've got of people that are already on this path and already moving towards their calling. Maybe they've been through my process already and they're just walking down the road. Okay. Maybe they're still on the process going through it.
So do you connect newer clients with existing clients or older clients?
If they're part of the community, yes.
So it's like you have your own community of people that you connect people with.
Yeah, I have my own mastermind group of people that have been through the Strength Finder process with me.
Okay. And the last piece of that is the calling, but you already talked about that as far as the why, going seven levels deep with the why, correct?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, that's part of it. I also have basically in November of 22, after we had already put in all of our chapters for Next Level Your Life, which was coming out in January, in November of 22, I got what Kyle would refer to as a God download. Okay. And that God download, it was a vision of a diagram, and it's 4 interlocking circles. And I saw the calling bright blue in the center, just kind of flashing, the focus of the whole thing type of thing. And so it took me like 2 weeks to put all the words together in the right form and fashion and all that sort of stuff. But I came out with this calling diagram. And so I call them the 4 keys to the calling. And key number 1 is just what provides income or impact. What puts money in your bank, or if you don't need money in your bank, why are you doing what you're doing? Okay. I'm sure you're familiar with that. You don't necessarily have to work your day job, and you're doing this podcast called Chiseled. Okay. You're doing it because God told you to. Well, that's a really good why. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a really good why. So, okay. So what provides impact? That's just providing impact for you. Okay. Second thing is abilities others affirm. And I use that term precisely because it's not just a strength finder, it's strength finder plus several other assessments that I take people through. So it all revolves around are other people speaking into your life saying, yes, you have that. Okay. Part of the coaching process with just a strength finder is to validate that and verify that. But there's some other pieces as well. So that is more on what I would call the logical side or the right brain side. Okay.
Okay.
So that's those 2 circles on the right side, on the left side, the logical side, left side of the page. And then the 2 circles on the right side of the page are what makes your heart cry. And this is often some kind of wound or hurt or something that happened in your childhood or at an early age or something that you're focused on. Okay. Something around, maybe a single mother is wanting to go help other single mothers. Okay. By the way, that doesn't apply to me. Right. But, going through a bankruptcy, I love to help Christian entrepreneurs. Okay. So, or almost a bankruptcy. It was shutting down the company to avoid bankruptcy. So I have a heart for people that have been on a journey, an entrepreneurial journey. So that's one of the reasons entrepreneurs are a big part of my audience, is because I have heart for them. I know their difficulties. And then the 4th circle is what are the desires of your heart? And to me, that goes back to that Proverbs 20 verse 5 thing. You have a passion in your heart. You have a desire in your heart. I believe God created us with those. He created us with those strengths and talents. He created us with those desires. He knew that he was going to put you in this situation where you would have those types of hurts that would make your heart cry. All right. So when you go through this process and you get all 4 of those circles nailed down where you really understand them, and then you bring them all together and look at what that common intersection is, that's when you really start knowing where your calling is and what is going on with it. And it worked that way for me, and it seems to resonate with a whole lot of people.
No, I love that. You put it all together, like the impact, the abilities others can affirm, what makes your heart cry, what's the desire of your heart. So when I hear desires of your heart, I hear like what makes your heart hum, right?
Mm-hmm. Or sing. What makes your heart
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you got to know that. So what do you think holds people back from discovering those desires earlier in their life?
Part of it is we're not taught to look for them. Okay. And I don't want to get down on the whole education road, right? But education trains people to learn how to get good grades so that you can go to college and get a degree, so that you can get a job, so that you be in the workforce. And it doesn't really encourage that whole creative thinking side of things, right? And we're not taught to explore the bigger picture. We're not taught to go after things like our desires and such like that, because it's a messy process. It's
Yeah.
just not something really easy to do. Okay. And so there's just a lot of people that have just never explored that. Part of it is that they're in a comfort zone, just like I was back in Australia. I was in a comfort zone. Had money coming in. I was married at the time. There's just nothing to really get me out of that comfort zone. And the problem with the comfort zone is the comfort zone can easily turn into a rut.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And that rut can easily turn into a grave that just happens to have the ends kicked out.
Yeah. 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 I get that. I totally get that. So then let me ask this question. Why wouldn't, if God puts the desires on your heart or in your heart, why wouldn't he just say, hey, here's your desires. I'm showing you what they are early on. And why do we have to figure it out?
Well, I believe he's done that with some people. I mean, if you go back to Isaiah or Jeremiah in the Old Testament, I believe he did that for them. Okay. But God is a God of uniqueness too, right? And I think God wants us to explore and get into a better version. I mean, I've heard that the whole reason of being a Christian is to be more like Jesus, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, grow up to be like Jesus, right? Okay. Well, Jesus had 30 years that we're not sure exactly what he was doing, other than one little incident when he was 11 or 12 or something where he was in the temple. Okay. So we don't know what the exact path is. Okay. But I believe each path is unique. And I believe he puts us in, he put me, born in Amarillo in 1954. And, yes, by the way, that does make me 70 years old right now. So born in Amarillo in 1954 to parents that were not very wealthy, that were not Christian, all that sort of stuff, because he had this journey planned out for me. And it's just, am I going to follow that journey? Am I going to stay in that comfort zone? Am I going to get out of it? I believe that we all have a unique assignment in the world. We have a unique calling, and we have that unique assignment. And if we don't do it, it's not going to get done in the way that it would be best done. But that's not going to stop God, because he'll figure out some other way. And it's not like it's going to surprise him either.
No, of course it's not going to surprise
you. He knows how we're going to mess up before we even mess up. He knows how we're going to mess up before we're born. So from that point of view, I can relax and say, okay, this is all just part of his plan, and I can just relax in.
Did you ever get to the point where you or any of your clients get to the point where, like, why does he just mess with me? Why can't he just give me the answer?
Oh, all the time. And I don't have a really good answer other than he does, and, it's his privilege to do that. He's got a reason for it, but I rely back on, I think it's Romans, for all things will come together for the good of those who love him. So, yeah. So, I mean, I just rely on that.
Yeah, it's part. I think it's part of the journey. Like sometimes I'm like, I'll ask the question, why? Why can't we just get to the point? Because I'm a pragmatic guy. Just get me to the point. But I think it's the growth. It's the growth in the journey and figuring it out that makes you the better person. And you learn, you discover, you fall, you get bumped, you get bruised, you get scraped, and that just it's part of the chiseling process. No pun intended, I should say, but it was a pun.
I will probably use it if you don't. So
there you go. So yeah, the last part of that though, Dale, is like you said, you're following your calling creates peace, direction, fulfillment, and joy. So my question to you is, what does fulfillment mean to you, and how do you explain that to others?
Well, I believe fulfillment is different for each person to a certain extent. Okay, fulfillment to me is, in the moment, if I can ask that question where you can actually visually see the person on the other side of the Zoom call have a light bulb go off over their head, that is fulfillment, because that, I know when that happens, God's smiling at me. And that's really all of it I care about is God smiling at me. Now, fulfillment in a longer term is, am I staying plugged into God's will, and am I following his will for my life? And so, one of the things that I'm still a little bit scared about my calling is that about a year ago, I went through some training with another organization called Exchange Approach, and what I saw them doing, they say that they're um, facilitating human growth at scale, or human interaction at scale, and that at scale was something that just kept poking at my noggin. At scale, at scale, at scale, and finally I realized, oh, you want me to inspire others at scale. That scares me. Okay. That's like, oh, you don't want me to just deal with the people that you bring to me. You want me to deal with not only them, but their contacts and whatever. And so I've got to figure out my systems and my growth so that I can handle hundreds, thousands, who knows, maybe millions.
Yeah, but you've been this far, and I think you said it scares you, which of course anything big should scare you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think in your heart of hearts that if it's His will, you're going to be okay. You're just going to have to get bumped, scraped, bruised, and cut up a little bit along the way, right?
Chiseled. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So, Dale, this has been fun. I've enjoyed talking to you here. Is there anything you want to add before we wrap up here?
Well, one little quote that I actually put in the transformational journey that I think helps people really capture what I want them to capture is this quote. Or actually, it's this question. What's the difference between an inheritance and a legacy? Now, there's a whole lot of right answers, okay? And I'm not going to say any of them are wrong, okay? But I like to say the difference is one word of two characters. An inheritance is what you leave to someone. A legacy is what you leave in someone.
I like that. Inheritance is what you leave to someone. Legacy is what you leave in someone.
Yeah.
I got to ask this question though, because when you say the word legacy, right? Legacy to me seems like I think the societal definition would be it's something you leave, like you said, you leave behind. I've heard you said one time, why can't you live your legacy?
Because your legacy is for others.
Okay.
Okay. Your legacy is not for you. Your legacy is what's the impact that you're leaving in the world.
Okay.
And that impact comes back to the fulfillment, the impact. That also comes back to the direction, because there's so many people out there that they don't know what the real direction is. And so they're going off on one side and following the shiny object to the other side and whatever, right? And so when you know your calling, you know this is the path and you can stay on it.
And therefore you can leave it in someone.
You can leave it in someone. You can make the difference that you were meant to make.
Yeah, that's inspirational. I love that. So Dale, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, probably the best way is just email, dale@coachdale.com. Okay. I'm also on LinkedIn at Coach Dale and Facebook at Coach Dale Young. So, and got website, coachdale.com, of course, as well. Although, like most websites, it's out of date because for a minute you get a website up, it's out of date. So
that's awesome. Well, last question, I usually ask this before I give you the opportunity to tell people how to get a hold of you is, you're 70 years old, right? How much more chiseling do you got going on in your life? How much longer are you going to do this coaching for others and help people find their calling?
I don't see the word retirement anywhere in the Bible. So I'm going to say I'm going to do it for the rest of my life, however short or long that may be. So
I love that, Dale. Thank you for sharing that, man. It's been a pleasure and a joy for me to sit here and talk to you and learn a little bit about you, learn more about you. And obviously I met you through the whole Kyle Wilson Inner Circle piece and the book. So that's been awesome. So Dale, I appreciate you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for leaving legacies, helping leave legacies in others, and keep on establishing your legacy for others. So thank you for that, Dale. I appreciate you. Until next time, everybody, let's go get chiseled.